You ever hear stories about people vanishing on the highway, or truckers swearing they saw something out there that should not exist? I used to laugh at that kind of talk. I thought it was just old road legends meant to spook rookies or keep drivers awake at night. But the highway has a way of showing you things once you have been on it long enough, things that will stick with you for the rest of your life. I am not talking about near crashes or drunks swerving into your lane. I am talking about the kind of terror that follows you in the dark, where your headlights can only reach so far, and beyond that is nothing but black. I remember one night clear as day. It was after midnight, on a long stretch of road in Arizona. The air was dry, and the stars were sharp enough to cut, but I swear it felt like the night was heavier than it should have been. The CB had gone silent for hours, and even the radio hissed with static, like it wanted to choke out any sound. I had just pulled a long haul from California, carrying a load of machine parts heading east. I was tired, sure, but not the kind of tired that makes you dream with your eyes open. I kept sipping coffee just to keep sharp, and I was steady on the road. The first thing that felt wrong was how empty it all was. I know that stretch of highway. I have run it dozens of times, and there is always at least one other rig or some late-night car passing by. But that night, it was only me, and then I saw it up ahead, maybe 100 yards or so. At first, it looked like a person walking right down the middle of the road. I flashed my brights, thinking maybe some stranded driver was trying to flag me down, but when the lights hit it, I swear to you it was not human. The figure was tall, 2 tall arms hanging low, almost touching the ground, and its head turned too slow to look at me, like it did not move right, like a puppet on strings. I gripped the wheel tighter and laid on the horn, but that thing just stood there, staring into the light of my truck, and the strangest part was its face. It had no mouth, only 2 black hollow eyes sunk deep, like holes burned straight through its skull. I swerved hard to miss it, tires screaming against the pavement. But when I looked back in my mirrors, there was nothing, no figure, no shadow, no sign I had even seen anything at all. The road was empty, as if it had never been there, and that was only the beginning. My friends, because from that night on the highway was never the same for me again. After that night with the figure on the road, I kept driving, but my hands would not let go of the wheel, like my knuckles were welded onto it, and I could feel my heartbeat rattling inside my chest, like the engine was pounding through my ribs. I tried to convince myself I was tired. Maybe it was a shadow, or maybe even heat playing tricks on me, but there was no heat shimmer at midnight in the desert, and no shadow could hold itself in the high beams of a rig. Like that, I told myself to focus, keep steady, and get to the next town. But I swear every time my headlights swept over a sign or a patch of roadside scrub, I thought I saw something moving just out of reach, and it made my skin itch, like ants crawling up my arms. I rolled down the window to get some air, but the desert wind was hot and heavy and carried a smell that did not belong out there. It smelled like copper and burnt wood, like someone had set fire to a forest and left the ashes to blow around for miles. I had not passed any fires, though, not a single glow in the distance, not even a flicker of orange. So where the hell did that smell come from? The CB crackled once, but no voice came through, just a sharp burst of static that made me jump out of my skin, and when it cleared, I swear I heard something like breathing slow and wet, like someone standing too close to the mic without saying a word. I grabbed the receiver and said, "Breaker, breaker, you got a copy?" But there was no response, just silence, and then another hiss, and what I swear sounded like a whisper too low to catch, but enough to send a chill crawling down my back. I dropped the mic back onto the hook and turned the volume knob down low, because the silence was bad, but that breathing was worse up. Ahead, I saw a gas station glowing in the distance like a lighthouse in the dark. I thought finally some sign of life, something normal to break this feeling, and I pulled in. The lot was empty. Not a single car, not even a beat-up pickup or another. Rig parked for the night. The lights were on, The neon open sign buzzed, but when I stepped inside, the place was deserted. The air smelled stale, like it had been locked up for months, even though the door swung open easy, and the coolers were humming. Behind the counter, I walked up and called out, "Anyone working tonight?" No answer. I banged the counter a couple times, nothing. The cash register was open and the drawer was empty, no bills, no coins, no receipts. It was like the place had been stripped down, but someone forgot to kill the lights. I walked the aisles looking for bottled coffee, or at least some jerky, but the shelves were bare, except for one thing right in the middle of the snack aisle, a single can of beans. No label, just a plain metal can with a dent in the side. I picked it up and felt how heavy it was, and I cannot explain why, but it made my stomach turn like I was holding something I should not be touching. I set it back down and left it where it was. And that was when I noticed something carved into the side of the wooden shelf, 4 letters scratched deep with a knife run. I swear to you that was enough for me. I turned right around and walked fast out of there, not even grabbing a drink back in the truck I locked the doors and pulled back onto the road. I looked in my mirrors, half expecting to see someone step out of that empty station, but the parking lot was dark again. The lights had gone out behind me, like someone flipped a switch as soon as I left. The highway stretched on for miles, and my eyes burned from trying to keep myself awake. The further I went, the stranger it got. The road signs were bent and twisted like someone had tried to tear them out of the ground. The mile markers had numbers. That did not make sense. I passed marker 117, and the next one said 115, then 118, like the order had been scrambled. When I slowed down to double-check, I noticed the ground around the poles looked disturbed, like something had been digging under them. Thought maybe it was roadwork, but there were no cones, no equipment, not even fresh asphalt, and I had not seen another vehicle in hours. That was when I started hearing it, a low rumble, not from the engine, not from the tires, but something under. The ground. It felt like the highway itself was growling, and it made the wheels shudder in my hands, like I was driving across the back of something alive. I pressed harder on the gas, trying to outrun it, but the sound followed for miles, until suddenly it cut off, leaving the night dead quiet again. And I swear the silence after that was worse than the noise itself. Then I saw headlights in my mirror, bright and steady, closing, and fast relief washed over me because finally someone else was on this road. I slowed a bit, thinking maybe another trucker would pass, and I could raise him on the CB, ask if he saw what I saw, but the headlights just stayed behind me at the exact same distance. I tapped the brakes. Nothing. I sped up. Nothing. They just hung there steady like they were locked onto me. I grabbed the mic again. "Breaker, breaker, you tailing me back there?" But no reply. The lights did not swerve or flash. They just followed mile after mile. I kept glancing in the mirrors until at one point I blinked and they were gone, just gone, like someone flipped a switch. I looked back down the empty stretch of highway, and there was nothing but black. My chest tightened like I could not catch my breath, and I knew I had to stop somewhere, get my head right. I saw a rest area sign 2 miles ahead and pulled in fast. The lot was empty, just one dim lamp buzzing overhead. I parked and shut off the engine, but the second it went quiet, I heard footsteps outside my cab, slow, steady, crunching on the gravel. I froze, listening hard. My windows were rolled up, the doors locked, but the footsteps circled the truck like someone was walking slow around me. I held my breath and reached for the flashlight I kept by the seat, but I never turned it on. I just sat there listening as the steps stopped right by my driver door and stayed there, not moving, just waiting. I finally worked up the nerve to lean over and look out, but there was nothing, no shadow, no person, no sign anyone had been there at all. Still, I knew I heard it. I know what boots on gravel sound like. I know the weight of someone walking, and that was real. I started the engine again, and the sound was like life rushing back into my bones. I pulled out of that lot so fast, the tires kicked up gravel behind me. But as I merged back onto the highway, I caught one last thing in my headlights. A figure standing at the edge of the rest area exit facing me, watching me drive away, and it looked just like the thing I had swerved To miss earlier, too tall, too thin arms, hanging wrong head tilted with those hollow eyes, and that was only the second night. I kept driving after that night, and every mile felt heavier than the last. I thought maybe I should pull over somewhere, call dispatch, and tell them I was running behind, but the truth was, I did not want to explain why I was late. Because how do you tell someone your rig got haunted on the open road? They would laugh me right off the CB, and next thing you know, every truck stop in 3 states would be buzzing about the fool who thought ghosts were tailing him. I figured the best thing to do was keep rolling, keep quiet, and just get to my drop point. But the problem was, the road would not let me go. By dawn, I had made it to the next town, a little dust-blown place with a diner and 2 gas pumps, and I thought maybe some coffee and eggs would make me feel human again. I parked the rig, walked inside, and the place looked normal enough. People sipping coffee, a waitress working the counter, frying bacon smell in the air. But when I sat down, every head in that diner turned to look at me. I do not mean just a glance either. I mean every single person, from the old man in the corner, to the couple by the window, to the waitress pouring coffee. They all froze and looked dead at me, like they had been waiting for me to arrive. Their eyes were flat, no smiles, no nods, just staring long enough that I shifted in my seat and cleared my throat. Finally, the waitress came over with a pot and said, "Eggs and toast, driver." Her voice was polite enough, but it was wrong, like she was reading lines off a script, and her eyes never blinked. She poured me a cup, set down a plate I had not even ordered, and walked back without another word. I stared at those eggs, steam rising off them, yolks bright and golden, but something in my gut twisted hard, like I knew better than to take a bite. I pushed the plate away, sipped the coffee, and nearly spat it back out because it was ice cold, not just lukewarm, but like someone had poured it straight from a freezer. I set the cup down, and the couple at the window smiled at me. First smile I had seen since I walked in, but it was the kind of smile that did not touch their eyes. Teeth too white, too wide, like masks trying to look human. I left money on the counter, more than enough to cover a bill I did not owe, and walked out without eating, back in my cab. I tried to convince myself I was just jumpy too much highway, not enough rest, but when I checked my side mirror before pulling out, I saw the entire diner pressed up against the glass windows. Inside, every patron, every face lined up, watching me leave, and not one of them blinked. I hit the accelerator and did not look back. The road out of town was straight and flat, but the further I got, the darker. The sky turned clouds, rolling in thick and fast until the sun disappeared and rain hammered down in sheets. I flipped on the wipers and headlights, but the road ahead blurred like I was driving into a wall of water. Visibility dropped to nothing, and I slowed down, careful not to jackknife. Then the radio flicked on all by itself. It was not music, not talk, just a low voice whispering, "Driver, driver, driver," over and over in time with the wiper blades. I turned the knob, tried to shut it off, but it would not stop, just kept repeating, "Driver, driver, driver," until it broke into laughter, high-pitched and sharp like metal scraping glass. I slammed the knob hard, and the sound cut, but my hands shook on the wheel. The rain eased a little, and the highway stretched on again. But I noticed something. Off about the mile markers, the numbers were backwards, counting down, instead of up. I started at mile 48, then mile 47, then mile 46, and I knew that was wrong because I had run this route before, and those markers do not count like that. When I hit mile 40, I looked down at my odometer, and the numbers were spinning backwards too, like the truck itself was undoing the miles I had already driven. That was when I saw the hitchhiker standing at the side of the road, thumb out under the rain. I know, better than to pick up strangers, but I swear to you, something about him was magnetic. He was tall, lean, dressed in a dark coat with the hood pulled low, and he did not flinch at the rain, just stood there waiting. I drove past without stopping, but When I checked the mirror, he was gone, and when I looked back at the road ahead, he was standing there again, further down, thumb still out. I passed him twice, 3 times, each time he was closer to the shoulder, and each time I did not stop. When I passed him the 4th time, he was not on the side anymore. He was standing dead center in the lane, facing me, and I had no choice but to slam the brakes. The rig skidded tires, screaming water spraying high. But when I came to a stop, the road ahead was empty. No sign of him, just wet asphalt stretching into the dark. I sat there, heart pounding, gripping the wheel, when suddenly there was a tap on my passenger window. I nearly jumped out of my seat, turned, and saw nothing but rain streaks on the glass. Then a second tap, louder, sharper, and I swear a shadow leaned across the glass from outside. I threw the truck into gear and tore down that road faster than I should have, hauling 30 tons on wet pavement. But I did not care. My chest heaved, lungs burning, eyes wide, but I had to put distance between me and whatever that was. By the time the rain cleared, I had burned through half a tank, and the sky was black again. No hint of dawn, no hint of sun, just eternal night. I checked the clock on the dash, and it still read the same time it had when I left the diner 3 hours earlier. 6:17 a.m., frozen hands ticking, but never moving forward. I hit the dash trying to shake the gauge, but it did not change, and that was when the CB clicked. Alive again this time, with a voice clear as day. It said my name, not my handle, not some random guess, but my real full name, spoken slow and careful. Then silence, then laughter low and rumbling, rolling through the speaker like someone was sitting right there in the cab with me. I yanked the mic breaker. Who is this? No response, just more laughter. And then a single word. Behind. I whipped my head around, looked into the sleeper, saw nothing but shadows and blankets. But my skin prickled, like someone was back there watching me, breathing, waiting. I grabbed the flashlight, snapped it on, swung the beam across the bunk. Nothing there. But the second I turned back to the wheel, I nearly lost control, because standing in the center of the road ahead was that same figure, tall, thin arms, wrong head, tilted eyes, hollow. I swerved hard again, but this time I clipped the shoulder trailer, fishtailed back, tires skidded, and I thought I was done for, but somehow the rig straightened out, and when I looked back, the road was empty again. At that point, I knew I was not just tired and not just seeing things. Something out here had its claws in me, and it was not letting go. I kept rolling, though, because that is all you can do on the highway. You keep moving forward, no matter what is chasing you behind or waiting for you up ahead. I kept my hands locked to the wheel and my eyes locked forward, and I told myself no more stops, no more gas stations, no diners, no rest areas. I was going to ride this highway until the sun came back, or until I dropped, whichever came first, I figured. Maybe if I just outran it, maybe if I kept the rubber rolling long enough, the road would spit me out back into the world of daylight and people and things that made sense. But the further I drove, the less sense anything made. The sky stayed black, as if the world had decided night was the only time left. I checked the clock again, and it was still frozen at 6:17 a.m., stuck like the hands were glued in place. The fuel gauge did not move either, though I had been running hot for hours. It was like I had slipped off the map into a place where the rules no longer counted. And if I am being honest with you, I think that is exactly what happened. The highway has cracks in it, places where it does not run through states and towns, but through something else, places you are not supposed to see, and if you are unlucky, or maybe just too tired one night, you fall right into one. I kept thinking about that figure I had swerved to miss twice now. 2 tall arms hanging, wrong head, tilted like a busted mannequin. With eyes like holes, I had seen a lot of strange things on the road, animals caught in headlights, weird folks wandering highways, but never something like that. That thing had weight. It had intent. It was not just passing through, it was waiting, and worse than that, I had the feeling it knew me. It was not random. It had chosen me for some reason. The CB stayed quiet for a while after that, except every so often I would catch a whisper, just a breath against the static, or my name drawn out low, and slow enough to make my skin crawl. The radio came alive once too, a burst of music like an old gospel hymn, but warped, dragging low notes, stretched until they sounded like moaning voices, and then silence again. I shut it all off and drove in. Quiet, but the quiet was worse because the longer I sat with just the engine humming, the more I swore I heard sounds that did not belong. A knock from the sleeper, a scrape under the chassis, a tapping against the passenger window that came in sets of 3 tap, tap, tap like fingers on the glass. I refused to look because I knew if I looked I would see something, and once I saw it, there would be no going back. Miles rolled by, though they did not feel like miles. The markers were gone completely. Now no numbers, no signs, not even county lines. It was just 2 strips of pavement stretching ahead into the dark. I could have been rolling in circles for all I knew. At one point, I saw another truck, coming, the first I had seen in hours, if not days. Big Peterbilt chrome shining even in the black, but as it got closer, my lights swept over the cab, and I saw there was no driver behind the wheel. The truck screamed past horn-blaring, trailer rattling, but the cab was empty, nothing in the seat knot, even a shadow. I nearly ran myself off the road watching it disappear in my mirror, but when I turned back it was gone. Not just down the road, gone, but vanished, like it had never been there. My stomach was in knots, and I thought maybe I should pull. Off, shut down, close my eyes. Even if something was waiting for me in the dark, it could not be worse than running blind on a road that no longer followed rules. I looked ahead, and like an answer, a sign appeared, glowing white letters against black. Rest Area 1, mile relief hit me hard, and I told myself I would stop there, just long enough to breathe. Maybe splash water on my face, maybe prove to myself I was still in the real world. I pulled off, followed the ramp, and rolled into the lot there. Were cars, this time, 6 of them lined up under the lamps, dusty old sedans and pickups, but at least there were people. Right, I parked the rig, killed. The engine stepped out and stretched my legs. The night air was thick, heavy, smelled like wet earth and copper, but at least it was air. I walked toward the restroom building, lights glowing warm in the windows, but as I passed one of the cars I noticed something. The windows were fogged over like someone had been breathing heavy inside. I leaned closer and saw handprints pressed into the glass, dozens of them. Small like a child's, all smeared like they had been clawing to get out. I staggered back and looked around, and every car in that lot was the same, windows fogged covered, in handprints from the inside. My throat went dry, but I pushed toward the building, telling myself it was still better than sitting in the cab, listening to whispers. I opened the door, stepped inside, and the air was wrong, too cold, like a freezer humming. Tiles wet under my boots. The stalls were closed, every one of them, and from inside came a sound, not flushing, not pipes, but whispering voices layered over each other, dozens of them, hissing words I could not catch. My breath clouded in front of me, and I knew I had to leave. But before I could move, one of the stall doors creaked open, slow and steady, and a hand slid out, pale grey fingers too long, curling around the edge, dragging nails against the metal. I turned and bolted out the door, not even looking back, sprinted to the rig, jumped in, locked the doors, fired the engine. And that was when I realized the lot was empty. The cars were gone, every last one. The lamps buzzed over bare pavement, and I was alone again. I threw the truck into gear and shot back onto the highway, hands, shaking teeth, grinding my jaw tight. And when I checked the mirror as I merged, I saw a figure sitting upright in my sleeper, just a shadow against the dark with those same hollow eyes watching me through the reflection. I nearly drove off the road, spinning out, but when I whipped my head around, the sleeper was empty. Nothing there but blankets and shadows, but I know what I saw. I slammed my fist against the wheel, cursed out loud, anything to drown the silence. But nothing made it better. The road just stretched on, and I felt like I had been swallowed. Whole hours, maybe days passed. I do not know. Time stopped meaning anything out there. I thought about shutting down, but some instinct told me if I stopped, I would never start again. The road had me, and the only way was forward. I passed another sign, eventually glowing in the dark. Welcome to Ashbrook Population 217. Finally, a town, something solid. I thought I rolled down the ramp into a main street lined with buildings, lights burning in the windows, but the place was dead. No people, no cars, just storefronts lit like they were waiting for business, but empty as a stage set. I parked in front of a diner, same neon sign, same buzzing. Light as the one I had seen before, and I swear to you it was the same diner, same cracked sign, same menu in the window, like I had driven in a circle straight back to the beginning. I sat there in the cab, staring through the windshield, trying to decide if I had lost my mind or if the road itself was folding back on me, looping me into some nightmare that never ended. And then the CB clicked alive again. Same low voice, same laugh, and it said clear as anything, "Welcome back, driver." I stared at that diner sign buzzing in the dark, and I knew it was the same one, because the crack in the O was shaped like a lightning bolt, and I remembered it from before, like it had branded itself into my head. The whole town looked staged, like someone had built it just to fool me. Windows glowing, but no movement, streets empty, no dogs, no people, no cars parked by the curb. I shut off the engine, and the silence pressed in so heavy it felt like a weight on my chest. The air smelled like rain and dust, but under that was something sharp, coppery like blood. I told myself, do not get out, stay in the rig, keep moving, but curiosity always gets you, and I am stubborn. So I climbed down and walked across the street toward that diner, the bell above. The door jingled when I opened it, same as last time, and the place looked identical. Booths, clean counters, wiped lights, warm and buzzing, but no one inside, not a soul. I walked up to the counter, and there it was again, a plate of eggs, toast and bacon, sitting hot and steaming like it had just been made, waiting for me. The smell was strong, too strong. Eggs, so rich they made my stomach twist, bacon greasy enough to coat my throat. I leaned closer and saw the yolk pulsing slow like a heartbeat. I pushed back fast, nearly knocking the stool over, and that was when the jukebox in the corner clicked alive all by itself and started playing. The song was an old country tune, but the voice was wrong, stretched, high-pitched, then low, dragging, like a record turning at the wrong speed, and in the reflection of the jukebox glass, I swear I saw people sitting in the booths, every one of them staring at me, eyes wide, mouths shut. When I spun around, the booths were empty again, but the cushions were indented like bodies had been sitting there. I ran out of that diner fast, heart hammering against my ribs, climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. I turned the key and the truck roared alive, thank God, because I was ready to peel out of that ghost town and never look back. But when I looked through the windshield, the street ahead was lined with people standing perfectly still. Men, women, children, all shapes, all sizes, just standing in the glow of the street lamps, staring straight at my rig, faces, pale eyes blank. Some of them had mouths stretched open wider than they should go, gaping, but silent. I laid on the horn. The sound thundered down the street, but none of them moved, not an inch, not even a blink. I threw the truck into gear. Tires screeched, smoke rolled up, and I barreled forward, and I swear those people did not move. They did not jump, they did not run, they just stood there as my headlights cut through them like smoke. And when I looked back in the mirrors, the street was empty again. The highway swallowed me back up, black and endless, the lamps of the town fading into nothing behind me, and once again it was just me and the hum of the wheels. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, but the CB had other plans. It clicked on sharp, a burst of static, then a voice low and smooth said, "Driver, you cannot leave." And I knew it was not a warning, it was a promise. I drove for what felt like forever, hands numb against the wheel, eyes burning, until I saw another rig, Up ahead, tail light steady, glowing red in the dark. Relief hit me like cold water because another driver meant another human. Someone real, someone alive. I eased up closer, called out on the CB breaker. You got a copy? Nothing. I tried again. No answer. The tail lights kept glowing steady, so I pulled alongside, and when I looked into the cab, my stomach turned, because the driver was there all right, but he was not alive. His head was slumped back against the seat, eyes open, mouth hanging slack. Skin grey like wax. His hands were still on the wheel, knuckles white, but the rig was moving smooth, steady down the lane. I honked hard, blared my air horn, but he did not flinch, and when my light swept over the cab, I saw movement behind him. In the sleeper, something crouched tall and thin, with eyes burning black, staring out at me through the glass. I floored it and pulled ahead, as fast as my load would let me, sweat pouring down my back throat, tight. The other truck fell behind until its lights were swallowed up by the dark, but the image of that shadow in the sleeper would not leave me, burned into my mind like hot iron. I wanted to stop. I wanted to pull over and crawl into the bunk and pray it would all go away, but the road had me trapped. And I knew stopping meant worse than anything I had already seen. The next stretch was empty, not even signs, not even reflectors, just black pavement running under my wheels. I felt like I was driving across nothing, like if I opened the door I would step out into space. The air inside the cab grew colder. Frost formed at the edges of the windshield. My breath fogged in front of me, and the radio clicked alive again. But this time it was children, laughing, high-pitched and cruel, echoing like it was coming from a long hallway. The laughter rose higher until it turned into screaming, and then cut off sharp, leaving only static. I yanked the knob to off, but the static kept playing, whispering voices threading through it like dozens of people, murmuring at once. I could not catch the words, but I felt them crawl inside my head, scraping at the back of my skull. The road curved, then, though I had not seen a curve sign, and suddenly headlights swept across my cab from the other lane. Another car passing at last. I slowed just enough to catch it, a station wagon, old wood panel sides, and inside, I swear, I saw a family, kids in the back, waving, smiling, but their faces were pale eyes, black mouths open wider and wider until they stretched. And too far. The car vanished into the rear view, and I nearly lost my stomach right there, gripping the wheel to keep steady. Hours dragged by, maybe days, I cannot tell anymore. My clock was still stuck at 6:17. The sun would not rise, and I was running on. Fumes, not from fuel, but from willpower alone. I told myself, keep going, just keep moving, because maybe the road would eventually spit me out, but deep down, I knew it would not. The road had me now, the way a spider has a fly, and every mile was another strand pulling tighter around me. I thought about calling dispatch again, but what would I say? Hey, boss, the highway ate me alive. I am not making my delivery. The thought almost made me laugh, but the sound died in my throat, because right then I saw something ahead that froze the breath in my lungs. A truck stop glowing like a beacon, neon signs, diesel pumps, rows of rigs parked under lamps, people moving about, filling tanks, grabbing coffee, normal as could be. I felt tears sting my eyes, relief, so strong it hurt. I pulled in slow, heart pounding with hope, parked the rig and stepped out. The air smelled like diesel and hot food, and it felt real, so real. I walked inside the diner section, and the sound of voices hit me, clatter of plates, chatter of drivers, all of it normal. I slid into a booth, breathing deep like I had just climbed out of hell, and maybe I had. The waitress came over, smiled, asked what I wanted, and I ordered coffee, eggs, bacon, anything just to anchor myself. She brought the plate, set it down, and I dug in, first bite of real food in what felt like forever. But halfway through the coffee, I froze because the clock on the wall behind the counter read 6:17 a.m., hands frozen, not moving, and every person in that diner, every driver, every waitress, every single one, slowly turned their head to look at me in unison, their eyes, blank mouths, slowly stretching into the same too wide grin. The highway has a strange way of turning into a living thing. When you drive it long enough, you start to feel its moods. Sometimes it feels quiet, like it is letting you pass in peace, and sometimes it feels restless, like it does not want you out. And then there are nights when it feels angry, like it wants to swallow you whole. I remember one particular run through Texas when I found myself learning that lesson the hard way. It started off like any other long flat stretches of road desert on both sides, and a sky so big it made you feel like an ant crawling across the earth. I had been thinking about that trucker I met in the diner, the one who told me about the mouthless man. His words about checking my mirrors were stuck in my head, and I kept glancing into them so often I almost drove myself off the road. But it was not my mirrors that got me that night. It was what I saw up ahead. It must have been 3 in the morning. The sky was dark, and the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming, but the clouds never broke, and the lightning never came. Instead, I spotted an old gas station sitting just off the side of the highway. One of those lonely places you only ever see at night. Flickering neon lights, a single pump. Leaning to one side like it was too tired to stand upright, I did not really need fuel, but something about that place called to me like I had to stop, so I pulled in. The lot was empty, not a single car, not even a stray dog in sight. The sign creaked in the wind, and I swear the air smelled like rot, like something had died nearby. I climbed down from the cab, stretched my legs, and walked toward the store. But before I even touched the door, I noticed something strange. The windows were dark, but I could hear music, faint at first, then clearer. As I leaned closer, it sounded like old country music, scratchy, like it was playing from a record player. And for some reason, that chilled me worse than silence would have. I pushed the door open. The bell above it jingled, and the smell inside hit me hard, like mold and dust and something sour. The lights flickered overhead, barely giving me enough to see the rows of shelves stocked with items so old they looked like they belonged in a museum. Dusty cans, labels faded, boxes yellowed like they had been sitting there for decades. But the strangest part was the man behind the counter. He was standing perfectly still, eyes fixed on me with the widest grin I had ever seen. Like his face was frozen in place. He wore a uniform that looked older than me, a faded shirt with a name tag that said Earl. His skin was pale, almost grey, and his eyes looked too glassy, like marbles. I tried to greet him, said something like, "Hey, Earl, you open this." Late, but he did not respond. He just kept smiling like he was waiting for me to ask the right question. I started to feel uneasy, so I grabbed a soda from one of the coolers and brought it to the counter. He rang it up without looking away from me, never blinking once his hands were ice cold when they brushed mine, and I swear, the second he touched me, I felt a rush of images flash through my head. I saw that same gas station, but it looked different, newer, brighter, with cars parked outside, and people laughing inside. I saw a family at the counter, kids eating candy, parents filling up at the pump. Then I saw darkness, the lights flickering out, the people screaming, the ground shaking, and something crawling up from beneath the floor. Something tall and thin, with no mouth, only those hollow black eyes. The vision ended as fast as it started, and I dropped the soda. Earl just smiled wider, like he knew exactly what I had seen. I backed out of there, quick heart hammering as the music grew louder. Even though the record player in the corner was not spinning anymore, I ran back to my rig, fired it up, and pulled out of that lot as fast as I could, and when I looked back in my mirrors, the gas station was gone. I swear to you, it was gone, not in the distance, not behind a bend, just gone, like it had never been there at all. I thought maybe I had dreamed it. Maybe the long hours were finally getting to me, but when I looked at my passenger seat, I saw the soda bottle still sitting there, the label, covered in dust older than anything I had ever seen, and the cap rusted shut. I threw it out the window and floored it, but my hands would not stop shaking the rest of the night, and it only got worse from there, because a few days later I heard about another driver who had disappeared on that exact same stretch of road. No trace of his rig, no sign of him at all. Just gone like the gas station. I had seen the other drivers at the next truck stop whispered about it. They said, "The road takes. People sometimes swallows them up whole, especially the ones who see things they are not supposed to see." And when they said that, I knew without a doubt they were talking about me, because I had seen it too, and deep down I knew the highway was not finished with me, not by a long shot. I stayed jumpy for weeks after that gas station night, every rig I passed. I caught myself checking the driver's face to make sure it was really a man behind the wheel and not some glass-eyed thing grinning back at me, and every empty mile I drove. A past in the desert felt like it was holding its breath, just waiting for me to slip up. The other truckers I ran into kept whispering about missing drivers on that stretch, and I swear every story sounded worse than the last one. Guy said his buddy pulled over to check a flat tire, and when he came back around to the cab, his truck was idling, door wide open, headlights shining, but the driver was gone, like he had never existed. Another swore he saw a whole convoy of rigs in his mirrors. But when he slowed down to let them catch up, there was nothing but the blacktop stretching empty behind him. And one night, after a long haul, I stopped at a lonely rest area off I-40, and that is when I realized these things we are seeing out here might not just be random, they might be connected. I pulled in, and there were maybe 3 other rigs parked in the lot, engines humming low under the night sky. I climbed down, stretched my legs, and was about to head inside to use the restroom when I noticed a group of people standing out in the dirt field beside the lot. At first I thought it was just some kids partying, or maybe a broken-down car crew waiting for a tow. But the longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. There were 7, maybe 8 of them standing in a perfect circle, not moving, not talking, just standing there with their faces tilted up at the sky like they were staring at nothing. I tried to shrug it off, but then one of them slowly turned and looked straight at me like he knew I had been watching. His face was shadowed, but I could see enough to tell something was wrong. His mouth was stretched wide, too wide, like it had been carved open from ear to ear, and I swear I could see rows of teeth like a shark, all shining. In the moonlight I froze right where I was, and that is when the rest of them turned too. Every one of those people had a smile that did not belong on a human face. It was stretched skin and raw flesh and teeth too sharp, and too many of them. They started walking toward the rest stop, slow and steady in perfect rhythm, like they were one body moving with 8 sets of legs. I climbed back into my cab so fast I nearly ripped the door off the hinges, fired up the engine and threw her into gear. But before I pulled out, I made the mistake of glancing at my side mirror, and I swear to you I saw something behind them, something taller than all of them, rising up from the desert like a shadow given bones. Its head tilted back, just like theirs, only it had no mouth at all, only those black holes for eyes. I hit the pedal and tore out of that rest area, gravel spraying behind me, heart beating so hard it rattled my chest, and I did not stop for 200 miles when I finally pulled over. At another truck stop, it was full of live music on the jukebox, drivers laughing, coffee flowing, and for a second I thought maybe I had just imagined it all. Maybe the long hours and the sleepless nights had finally broken me. But then I overheard 2 drivers at the counter. One said to the other, "Did you hear about those weird folks gathering at the rest areas again?" And the other nodded real serious and said, "Yeah, they call themselves the Watchers. They say they serve the mouthless one." My stomach dropped, hearing that I did not even ask questions. I just paid for my coffee and left, but those words stuck with me. Watcher's mouthless one, and as much as I wanted to laugh it off, part of me knew they were not joking. I knew because I had seen them, and I had seen him, the mouthless man himself, standing taller than the sky, with those eyes burning into me from the dark that night. I started to wonder. Maybe this was not just some ghostly figure haunting truckers. Maybe this was bigger. Maybe there was a whole damn cult out here on the highways, serving him, worshipping him, maybe even feeding him with the drivers who disappear. Because the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Drivers vanish, without a trace, rigs found empty. Gas stations appearing and disappearing in the desert, people gathering at night in circles, smiling with carved mouths. It was all tied together, and the center of it all was him. The mouthless man. I wish I could tell you. I turned around and went home that night that I parked my rig for good and never drove another mile. But the truth is, the highway has a hold on me, just like it does on every long-haul trucker. We are addicted to the road, to the motion, to the freedom of it all. So I kept driving, even knowing damn well I was rolling deeper into the dark, and part of me thinks that is exactly what he wanted. There is something I figured out about the highway after all those years behind the wheel, and it ain't something you'll hear from dispatch or read in a safety manual. The road itself is alive in a way. It breathes, it hungers, and sometimes it chooses who gets to make it home and who gets swallowed up. I used to laugh when old-timers talked like that. I thought it was just truck stop nonsense, the kind of stories you swap over coffee and pie to keep the rookies nervous. But after what I saw that night with those smiling freaks and the thing standing behind them, I couldn't laugh anymore. I started noticing patterns, things that didn't feel random at all. It was like the road had places where it bent reality, places where the normal world just thinned out and something else slipped through, and every time I rolled across one of those places, I felt it in my bones. One stretch in Oklahoma sticks with me even now. I was hauling steel beams, middle of summer sun, beating down all day. But when night came, it was like somebody flipped a switch and the air turned cold, too cold. My windows fogged from the inside, and my breath came out in clouds. Even though my thermometer said it was 80 degrees outside, I tried the heater. Nothing changed. Radio dead CB silent, just the hum of my engine and the hiss of my tires. Then up ahead, I saw taillights, a whole line of them, maybe 6 or 7 cars spaced evenly like a convoy moving slow. I eased up thinking, maybe it was road. It worked. But the closer I got, the stranger. It looked the cars were old, real old, like from the 50s, paint faded chrome, rusted out, but their lights shined bright as if they were brand new. They were moving in perfect formation, not drifting, not changing, lanes, not even slowing for hills. I dropped back, not wanting to get too close, and for 20 minutes I just followed, watching those taillights glow red in the dark. Then, one by one, they started peeling off the road, each car turning down an exit ramp that wasn't there. I swear I looked twice, checked my GPS, checked the map. There was no exit, but they kept turning anyway, disappearing into the dark until only one car was left, a black Cadillac riding low to the ground. And when I finally pulled up beside it, I looked through the window and nearly lost control of my rig. The driver had no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched over a skull. It turned its head toward me, and I could feel it staring, even though it had no eyes. I floored it past that thing as fast as I could, and when I looked back, the Cadillac was gone. Not behind me, not pulled over, just gone. The road stretched empty, like it had never been there. I didn't tell anyone about that knot. At first I thought maybe I'd cracked from too much caffeine and too little sleep. But a week later, at a truck stop in Missouri, I overheard 2 drivers talking. One said, "You ever see the Phantom Convoy?" And the other nodded real slow like he didn't. "Want to remember it?" They said it's a line of cars that runs forever out on certain highways, and if you follow them long enough, they'll lead you someplace you can't come back from. They said that's how some of the missing drivers go. They get curious, they follow and the road takes them. I wanted to ask if they'd ever seen the Cadillac with no face, but I kept my mouth shut, because I already knew the answer. That thing was part of it, part of the Watchers, part of the mouthless man's reach stretching across the country. The more I drove, the more I realized these weren't just random encounters. They were all pieces of a puzzle too big and too dark for any one man to understand. Gas stations that don't exist, convoys that vanish, cults gathering in the desert, and always, always, that tall figure with no mouth watching from the edge of the highway, like the road itself was his altar, and us truckers were just offerings waiting to be taken. I'll tell you something. Else too, I started finding carvings marks left on rest stop tables, scratched into bathroom stalls, even burned into the concrete, sometimes a circle with no end, and a figure inside tall and thin with no mouth. Sometimes just two black circles for eyes and a line where the mouth should be crossed out, like it had been erased. I saw those marks in Texas, in Nevada, in Kansas. Hell, I even saw one carved into the wall of a way station in Tennessee. And every time I saw one, I felt that same chill in my bones, like I was being reminded this wasn't just my problem, this was everywhere. The whole highway system laced with it, like veins carrying poison across the country. And here's the part that keeps me up at night, brother. What if that's the point? What if the highways we love so much, the endless blacktop that keeps America moving, were built on cursed ground? What if every stretch of road is just feeding him mile by mile, driver by driver, sacrifice after sacrifice? I don't know. If the government knows about it, or if they're in on it, or if it's something older than all of us. But I do know this: once you've seen him, once you've crossed into his world, the road won't ever let you go. I figured maybe if I kept rolling miles under me, the road wouldn't catch up. But you can't outrun something that lives in the pavement itself. One night out in Nevada, I learned that the hard way. I was hauling refrigerated goods long stretch. Nothing but desert brush, and a sky so wide it felt endless. The kind of night where you can see every star sharp as a nailhead. I kept the radio on low, just to have some sound in the cab, but even the music felt thin, like it was scared to echo out into the dark. I had been driving steady for hours when I noticed something strange. The mile marker I passed was 147. Then a few minutes later, another mile marker read 147. Again, I thought maybe it was a misprint, but then the next one said 147 too. I slowed down, checked the GPS, and it froze, dead, no signal, no map, just a blank grey screen. I kept rolling, thinking maybe it was a glitch, but the more markers I passed, the more I realized I wasn't moving forward at all. I was trapped in a loop. Same scrub brush, same bent highway sign, same roadkill on the shoulder over and over, like I was stuck in a film reel, playing on repeat. I pulled into the next rest area. I saw, thinking maybe stopping would reset it. But when I parked, I realized I had been there already. The same graffiti on the bathroom door, the same dent in the vending machine, the same broken light buzzing overhead. I got back in the cab, heart pounding, because I knew right then this wasn't a mistake. This was something else. The road had me, and it wasn't going to let me go. So I kept driving, loop after loop, checking the clock on the dash. But the numbers stopped changing. It was always 3:33 in the morning, the kind of time that feels cursed all on its own after what must have been 10 loops, maybe more. I saw something different. Headlights behind me glowing too bright white as bone. They crept up slow, gaining on me, until I could see it in my mirror, a convoy of rigs, all black, every one of them, no logos, No plates, just endless chrome and steel shining in the dark. They didn't pass me. They just followed, keeping the same distance, no matter how fast or slow I went. Then one by one they turned off onto an exit ramp, only this time the ramp was real. I swear it hadn't been there before, but I saw it clear as day, lit by their taillights. I don't know why, but I followed them. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was desperate, maybe the road wanted me to. I rolled down that ramp and ended up in a place that shouldn't have existed. It was another rest area, but not like the ones, this one was huge, filled with rigs and cars and buses, all parked neat as pins, but none of them had drivers. I walked the lot with my flashlight, and every cab door was open, every seat. Empty radios, hissing static like they'd been abandoned all at once. Then I saw them, the watchers standing in the middle of the lot in a wide circle, maybe 20 of them. This time, faces, pale mouths, carved wide smiles, gleaming in the light of the high-mast lamps. They were chanting something low, too low to make out the words, but it wasn't English. It was older than that, deep, like it came from the ground itself. I backed toward my truck, but then I felt it before. I saw it. The air grew heavy, the shadows stretched, and there he was, rising up from the middle of their circle, taller than the lights themselves. The mouthless man, his eyes like burning holes staring straight through me, his arms stretched long, and when he moved, it sounded like the cracking of old wood. The watchers all dropped to their knees, mouths opening wider, until I thought their jaws would snap clean off. They were worshipping him, feeding him with their voices, though he had no mouth. I swear I could hear him answering them inside my skull, like his words were crawling through my head. Not spoken, but carved there. He told me I was his, now that the road had claimed me, that every mile I drove was a mile closer to him. I scrambled back into my rig, slammed the door, and fired her up tires, squealing as I tore out of that cursed place back onto the highway. But when I checked my mirrors, the exit ramp was gone, the lot. The watchers, the rigs all gone like smoke in the wind. I drove, until sunrise, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. And when I finally pulled into a truck stop, I checked my logbook. The hours didn't match up. I'd lost nearly 7 hours, like they'd been erased, and scrawled across the margin in handwriting that wasn't mine, were 3 words: "See you soon." I figured maybe if I kept rolling miles under me, the road wouldn't catch up, but you can't outrun something that lives in the pavement itself. One night out in Nevada, I learned that the hard way. I was hauling refrigerated goods long stretch. Nothing but desert brush, and a sky so wide it felt endless. The kind of night where you can see every star sharp as a nailhead. I kept the radio on low, just to have some sound in the cab. But even the music felt thin, like it was scared to echo out into the dark. I had been driving steady for hours when I noticed something strange. The mile marker I passed was 147. Then a few minutes later, another mile marker read 147. Again, I thought maybe it was a misprint, but then the next one said 147 too. I slowed down, checked the GPS, and it froze, dead, no signal, no map, just a blank grey screen. I kept rolling, thinking maybe it was a glitch, but the more markers I passed, the more I realized I wasn't moving forward at all. I was trapped in a loop. Same scrub brush, same bent highway sign, same roadkill on the shoulder over and over, like I was stuck in a film reel playing on repeat. I pulled into the next rest area. I saw, thinking maybe stopping would reset it. But when I parked, I realized I had been there already. The same graffiti on the bathroom door, the same dent in the vending machine, the same broken light buzzing overhead. I got back in the cab, heart pounding, because I knew right then this wasn't a mistake. This was something. Else the road had me, and it wasn't going to let me go. So I kept driving loop after loop, checking the clock on the dash. But the numbers stopped changing. It was always 3:33 in the morning, the kind of time that feels cursed all on its own after. What must have been 10 loops, maybe more. I saw something different, headlights behind me glowing too bright white as bone. They crept up slow, gaining on me until I could see it in my mirror, a convoy of rigs, all black. Every one of them, no logos. No plates, just endless chrome and steel shining in the dark. They didn't pass me. They just followed, keeping the same distance no matter how fast or slow I went. Then, one by one, they turned off onto an exit ramp. Only this time, the ramp was real. I swear it hadn't been there before, but I saw it clear as day, lit by their taillights. I don't know why, but I followed them. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was desperate. Maybe the road wanted me to. I rolled down that ramp and ended up in a place that shouldn't have existed. It was another rest area. But not like the ones, this one was huge, filled with rigs and cars and buses, all parked neat as pins, but none of them had drivers. I walked the lot with my flashlight, and every cab door was open, every seat empty, radios hissing static like they'd been abandoned all at once. Then I saw them, the watchers standing in the middle of the lot in a wide circle, maybe 20 of them this time, faces pale, mouths carved, wide smiles. Gleaming in the light of the high-mast lamps, they were chanting something low, too low to make out the words, but it wasn't English. It was older than that, deep, like it came from the ground itself. I backed toward my truck, but then I felt it before. I saw it, the air grew heavy, the shadows stretched, and there he was, rising up from the middle of their circle, taller than the lights themselves. The mouthless man, his eyes like burning holes, staring straight through me, his arms stretched long, and when he moved, it sounded like the cracking of old wood. The watchers all dropped to their knees, mouths opening wider, until I thought their jaws would snap clean off. They were worshipping him, feeding him with their voices, though he had no mouth. I swear I could hear him answering them inside my skull, like his words were crawling through my head. Not spoken, but carved there. He told me I was his. Now that the road had claimed me, that every mile I drove was a mile closer to him. I scrambled back into my rig, slammed the door and fired her up tires, squealing as I tore out of that cursed place, back onto the highway. But when I checked my mirrors, the exit ramp was gone, the lot, the watchers, the rigs all gone like smoke in the wind. I drove until sunrise, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. And when I finally pulled into a truck stop, I checked my logbook. The hours didn't match up. I'd lost nearly 7 hours, like they'd been erased and scrawled across the margin in handwriting that wasn't mine were 3 words, "See you soon." After that night with the CB voices, I swore to myself I wouldn't answer again, no matter what, no matter who called. But you know how the road works. After enough nights alone with nothing but static for company, your mind starts to wander, and loneliness can be just as dangerous as anything supernatural. So when a voice broke through one foggy midnight and said, "Clear as day, driver, you're tired, pull off for gas and food," I almost laughed at the timing. My tank really was low. I hadn't eaten in 12 hours, and the next station wasn't supposed to be for another 50 miles. I glanced down at the gauge needle, kissing empty. Then up ahead, I saw lights on the horizon, glowing soft like a small town tucked off the interstate. The sign said, "Welcome to Ashwood." And I swear to you I'd never seen it before, and I've run that stretch 100 times. I told myself, maybe I just missed it on the map. Maybe it was one of those old coal towns that still had a diner and a pump or two I pulled. Off the exit, the ramp was narrow, cracked weeds growing up through the asphalt, as if it hadn't been maintained in decades, but the lights ahead glowed steady. I rolled slow into town, passing houses leaning on their foundations, windows boarded, but lanterns burning inside, like someone still lived there. The gas station sat at the center, one of those old-fashioned ones with 2 glass pumps and a flickering neon sign. I pulled in, shut down, and stepped out, and the first thing that hit me was the silence. No crickets, no wind, just heavy air like the whole place was holding its breath. The attendant came out from the shadows wearing a uniform so faded it was almost grey, his face hidden under the brim of his cap. He didn't speak, just started pumping my tank. I said, "Thanks, buddy," but he didn't respond when I turned. I noticed the diner across the street full of people, every booth taken, every stool at the counter occupied, but not a single sound came from inside. Not forks clinking, not voices, nothing. Just the eerie sight of them sitting perfectly still, their faces pale and turned toward the windows as if they'd been waiting for me. I felt my gut twist, but hunger gnawed at me worse. So I walked in. The bell over the door jingled, and instantly every head turned in unison to look at me, their eyes hollow and unblinking. I froze right there on the threshold. Then a waitress in a uniform straight out of the 50s walked up. Her smile too wide, too stiff, like it had been painted on. She said, "Sit anywhere, sugar," her voice sweet but flat like a recording. I slid into a booth and she brought me coffee, already poured, steaming black. I asked for eggs and toast. She nodded, but never wrote it down, just drifted away. To the kitchen, the people in the diner kept staring until slowly, one by one, they turned their heads back to their plates. Only I noticed they weren't eating their food. Untouched, congealed with age, was piled in front of them like it had been sitting there for years. When the waitress came back, she set a plate in front of me. Eggs, sunny side up, toast buttered. But the smell hit me rancid, sour, like rot. I pushed it away, my stomach turning. Then the man in the booth across from me leaned forward. Finally breaking the silence, he said, "You shouldn't have stopped here." His lips barely moved, his voice a hoarse whisper. I leaned closer, said, "What do you mean?" He shook his head, eyes wide with terror, and repeated, "You shouldn't have stopped." Here the waitress slammed the coffee pot down hard enough to crack the counter, and the whole diner went silent again. No one moved, no one breathed. I stood up, ready to bolt, but the door I'd come through was gone. In its place, a wall of old wood. Paneling stretching seamless across the front of the diner, I spun around, looking for another exit. But every window now showed nothing but black void. No street, no gas station, just endless darkness pressing against the glass. I could feel the weight of all those eyes on me again, the patrons turning their heads in perfect unison. The waitress stepped closer, smile stretched wider than any human mouth should go. Her voice dripping with sugar, but sharp underneath like broken glass. She said, "Sit down, driver, eat your meal, or you'll never leave." I backed toward the counter, but the man in the booth shook his head slowly, his eyes pleading with me not to obey. I didn't know what to do, my heart hammering. I grabbed the hot coffee cup and hurled it at the nearest window. It shattered, but instead of breaking out into the street, the glass dissolved into swirling smoke cold as ice. The darkness outside began to seep in, curling tendrils stretching toward me. I bolted for the kitchen, pushed through the swinging doors, and nearly gagged. The room was filled, floor to ceiling, with plates of untouched food, rotting piles of eggs, toast, bacon, pancakes, all crawling with maggots, like every meal ever served had just been dumped back. There, the stench choking. I stumbled through, nearly slipping. When I spotted a back door, I lunged for it, pushed hard, and found myself outside behind the diner. But it wasn't the alley I expected. Instead, I stood in the middle of the highway, my truck idling lights still on, gas tank full, as if I'd never left it behind. The diner was gone, the town was gone, nothing but trees and blacktop stretching on both sides. I scrambled back into the cab, slammed the locks shut, and tore out of there, my hands shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheel straight. I checked my clock and nearly wrecked when I saw it. It was the exact same minute I'd pulled off the exit, as if not a single second had passed the logbook. The GPS, everything agreed. No time lost, but my clothes reeked of rot, and my hands were still sticky with old coffee. I don't know what Ashwood was or how many drivers it has swallowed, but I know this. I never found that town again, no matter how many times I ran that route. And part of me is glad, because the way those people looked at me, I know if I'd taken one bite of that meal, I wouldn't have left at all. After that night with the CB voices, I swore to myself I wouldn't answer again, no matter what, no matter who called, but you know how the road works after enough nights alone with nothing but static for company. Your mind starts to wander, and loneliness can be just as dangerous as anything supernatural. So when a voice broke through one foggy midnight and said, clear as day driver, "You're tired, pull off for gas and food," I almost laughed at the timing. My tank really was low. I hadn't eaten in 12 hours, and the next station wasn't supposed to be for another 50 miles. I glanced down at the gauge needle, kissing empty. Then up ahead, I saw lights on the horizon glowing soft, like a small town tucked off the interstate, the sign said. Welcome to Ashwood, and I swear to you I'd never seen it before, and I've run that stretch 100 times. I told myself maybe I just missed it on the map. Maybe it was one of those old coal towns that still had a diner and a pump or two I pulled. Off the exit, the ramp was narrow, cracked weeds growing up through the asphalt, as if it hadn't been maintained in decades, but the lights ahead glowed steady. I rolled slow into town, passing houses leaning on their foundations, windows boarded, but lanterns burning inside, like someone still lived there. The gas station sat at the center, one of those old-fashioned ones with 2 glass pumps and a flickering neon sign. I pulled in, shut down, and stepped out, and the first thing that hit me was the silence. No crickets, no wind, just heavy air, like the whole place was holding its breath. The attendant came out from the shadows wearing a uniform so faded it was almost grey, his face hidden under the brim of his cap. He didn't speak, just started pumping my tank. I said, "Thanks, buddy," but he didn't respond. When I turned, I noticed the diner across the street full of people, every booth taken, every stool at the counter occupied, but not a single sound came from inside, not forks clinking, not voices, nothing, just the eerie sight of them sitting perfectly still, their faces pale and turned toward the windows as if they'd been waiting for me. I felt my gut twist, but hunger gnawed at me worse, so I walked in. The bell over the door jingled, and instantly every head turned in unison to look at me, their eyes hollow and unblinking. I froze right there on the threshold. Then a waitress in a uniform straight out of the 50s walked up, her smile too wide, too stiff, like it had been painted on. She said, "Sit anywhere, sugar," her voice sweet but flat like a recording. I slid into a booth, and she brought me coffee, already poured steaming black. I asked for eggs and toast. She nodded, but never wrote it down, just drifted away. To the kitchen, the people in the diner kept staring until slowly, one by one, they turned their heads back to their plates. Only I noticed they weren't eating their food. Untouched, congealed with age, was piled in front of them like it had been sitting there for years. When the waitress came back, she set a plate in front of me, eggs, sunny side up, toast buttered. But the smell hit me, rancid, sour, like rot. I pushed it away, my stomach turning. Then the man in the booth across from me leaned forward, finally breaking the silence. He said, "You shouldn't have stopped here." His lips barely moved, his voice a hoarse whisper. I leaned closer, said, "What do you mean?" He shook his head, eyes wide with terror, and repeated, "You shouldn't have stopped." Here the waitress slammed the coffee pot down hard enough to crack the counter, and the whole diner went silent again. No one moved, no one breathed. I stood up, ready to bolt, but the door I'd come through was gone in its place, a wall of old wood, paneling, Stretching seamless across the front of the diner, I spun around looking for another exit, but every window now showed nothing but black void. No street, no gas station, just endless darkness pressing against the glass. I could feel the weight of all those eyes on me again, the patrons turning their heads in perfect unison. The waitress stepped closer, smile stretched wider than any human mouth should go, her voice dripping with sugar but sharp underneath like broken glass. She said, "Sit down, driver, eat your meal or you'll never leave." I backed toward the counter, but the man in the booth shook his head slowly, his eyes pleading with me not to obey. I didn't know what to do, my heart hammering. I grabbed the hot coffee cup and hurled it at the nearest window. It shattered, but instead of breaking out into the street, the glass dissolved into swirling smoke, cold as ice. The darkness outside began to seep in, curling tendrils stretching toward me. I bolted for the kitchen, pushed through the swinging doors, and nearly gagged. The room was filled floor to ceiling with plates of untouched food, rotting piles of eggs, toast, bacon, pancakes, all crawling with maggots like every meal ever served had just been dumped back. There, the stench choking, I stumbled through, nearly slipping, when I spotted a back door. I lunged for it, pushed hard, and found myself outside behind the diner. But it wasn't the alley I expected. Instead, I stood in the middle of the highway, my truck idling, lights still on, gas tank full, as if I'd never left it behind. The diner was gone. The town was gone. Nothing but trees and blacktop stretching on both sides. I scrambled back into the cab, slammed the locks shut, and tore out of there. My hands shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheel straight. I checked my clock and nearly wrecked when I saw it. It was the exact same minute I'd pulled off the exit, as if not a single second had passed the logbook. The GPS, everything agreed. No time lost. But my clothes reeked of rot, and my hands were still sticky with old coffee. I don't know what Ashwood was or how many drivers it has swallowed, but I know this: I never found that town again, no matter how many times I ran that route. And part of me is glad, because the way those people looked at me, I know, if I'd taken one bite of that meal, I wouldn't have left at all. I'd always thought the highway was endless. Like no matter how far you drove, there would always be another stretch, another town, another truck stop, another dawn waiting for you over the horizon. But that last run taught me different. I learned. The road has an end, and it ain't marked on any map. It's a place where the blacktop itself folds over like a snake eating its tail. A place where the mouthless man waits for the ones he has chosen. I didn't mean to end up there. I was hauling south through Louisiana fog, thick as soup, wrapped around the cab headlights' useless radio-dead GPS, frozen on a screen that just read "searching for signal" over and over. I drove for what felt like hours through that fog until I realized I was passing the same exit again and again, each sign bent, each lamp flickering like a dying firefly. At first I thought I was tired, looping the same mistake, but then I noticed the fuel gauge wasn't moving, the time on the dash wasn't changing. I was caught in something bigger than exhaustion. I was trapped in one of those places where the road bends wrong. I pulled into a rest stop, hoping to break the loop. It was empty as a graveyard. Just one dim light buzzing overhead, and a row of vending machines, humming out of tune. And that's when I saw them, the watchers standing in a circle in the middle of the lot, mouths carved wide, grinning at the sky. And at the center of their circle stood him, taller than I remembered, thin as a shadow, with no mouth, and those hollow eyes pulling me in like gravity. I should have turned, I should have floored it and never looked back. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were stuck to the pavement, and my heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. One of the watchers stepped forward, face a shredded smile, eyes gone cloudy. He spoke in a voice that rattled like broken glass and said, "Driver, you have seen the road. You belong to him now." They all started chanting low and deep their words. Not English, not anything I recognized, just sound that hurt to hear. The ground trembled beneath my boots' cracks, splitting the asphalt wide like veins opening, and from those cracks rose the smell of rot and fire and endless miles of screaming road. The mouthless man raised his head, and even without a mouth I heard him inside me. A voice not made of sound, but made of thought, filling every corner of my skull. He said, "The road feeds me, and now so will you." I don't remember drawing my knife, but I had it in my hand, my last line of defense against something too big to fight. I shouted, "I ain't yours, I ain't anybody's, I'm just a driver," and I swung at the nearest watcher blade, sinking into flesh that wasn't flesh, blood that wasn't blood, spraying black and thick like oil. The thing laughed through its torn smile as it fell, and the others closed in. But in that moment, the fog broke the headlights of my rig, cut through the night like salvation. I don't know how I got back into the cab. Maybe the road let me, maybe something else pushed me, but I was behind the wheel, hands white on the wheel engine, screaming as I floored it straight through their circle, the watchers scattering like shadows in daylight, the mouthless man towering over me, his hollow eyes burning into mine. But I kept driving. I didn't slow down, didn't blink, didn't breathe until the fog was gone, and the sky lightened with the first blush of dawn. I pulled over, shaking so hard I thought my bones would snap, the rig idling quiet and faithful under me, the world around me finally. Normal highway signs, birdsong, even another driver blowing past like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew I had slipped through his world, and somehow come out the other side. I never saw the watchers again.